Commander Vex 9 clicked his mandibles together in what could generously be called amusement, though his subordinates knew better than to mistake it for actual joy. The holographic display before him showed exactly what he had expected to see. Another batch of candidates preparing for the flooded trial, and among them, predictably, sat one human. "Sir?" Lieutenant Kara's voice carried that particular tone she used when she thought her commander might be losing what passed for his mind. "Are you certain we should allow the human to participate? The mortality rate for this trial is 97.3%. Vex 9's compound eyes swiveled toward her, each facet reflecting the blue light of the command center. Precisely why it will be so entertaining to watch another human attempt the impossible. Tell me, Kara, how many species have successfully completed the flooded trial in the past century? 17, sir. All of them aquatic or semi-aquatic by nature. And how many humans? Kara's silence stretched longer than a vegan diplomatic ceremony. Finally, she admitted, 0, sir. Exactly. Vex 9 rubbed his claws together, producing a sound like grinding metal. So either this Marcus fellow will provide us with a spectacular failure to document, or, well, let's not concern ourselves with impossibilities. Down in the preparation chambers, Marcus Kane sat cross-legged on the cold metal floor, completely ignoring the other candidates who were either meditating, performing elaborate stretching routines, or, in the case of the Aquarian delegate, literally swimming laps in a portable water tank. The human appeared to be drawing. The voice belonged to Reef Singer, a pelagic whose gills fluttered with barely concealed disdain. Her blue-green skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that roughly translated to, "I am superior to you in ways your primitive brain cannot comprehend." Marcus looked up from his floor diagram, grinning with the kind of expression that made other species instinctively check their valuables. "Oh, just working out some physics problems. You know how at Island Reef Singer's pattern shifted to something considerably less polite. Physics will not help you when the waters rise, mammal. The trial of the drowned peaks has claimed champions from 100 worlds. Your soft flesh and air-breathing weakness will be your doom within the first hour." "Probably," Marcus agreed cheerfully, returning to his stick drawing. "But hey, at least I'll go down in a blaze of mediocrity, right?" The pelagic warrior's patterns flickered in confusion. She had prepared for anger, fear, or desperate bravado. She had not prepared for whatever this was. The trial arena itself defied several laws of physics and at least 3 theories of reasonable engineering. Imagine, if you will, an artificial valley spanning 50 kilometers, filled with structures that rose like metallic mountains toward a dome that flickered between transparency and opacity. The twist? Every 6 hours, the entire valley flooded with water from sources that somehow violated conservation of mass. The water rose exactly 400 meters, stayed for 3 hours, then drained away through mechanisms that baffled even the engineers who built them. "Ladies, gentlemen, and various other configurations of sentient matter," announced the trial coordinator, a being whose species name was an unpronounceable series of harmonic vibrations. "Welcome to the 147th flooded trial. Your objective is simple. Survive for 72 hours while the arena cycles through its flood patterns. Food, water, and medical supplies are scattered throughout the structures. But here, the coordinator paused for dramatic effect. They are only accessible when the waters recede." Marcus raised his hand. "Quick question. Are we allowed to bring tools?" "Each candidate may bring one tool of their choosing, no larger than can be carried in 2 hands. The other candidates had brought what you might expect. Reef Singer carried a crystalline harpoon that could cut through most known materials. Thorax Prime, the insectoid representative, had selected some kind of multi-dimensional compass. The gravitic delegate floated beside what appeared to be a personal force field generator. Marcus had brought a rope. Specifically, he had brought exactly 50 meters of Earth-manufactured climbing rope, the kind that mountain rescue teams used. It looked pathetically mundane, next to the high-tech equipment surrounding it. "A rope," Reef Singer observed, her bioluminescent patterns now cycling through what could only be described as contemptuous amusement. "The human brings a rope to the trial of the drowned peaks." "It's a really good rope," Marcus said defensively. Commander Vex 9 watched the proceedings from his command center, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that suggested either deep thought or the early stages of a nervous breakdown. The human brought a rope, a single rope, to a trial designed to test adaptation, survival instincts, and technological integration. "Sir," Kara ventured, "perhaps he doesn't fully understand the nature of the challenge?" "Oh, I think he understands perfectly well. That's what worries me." The trial began at dawn, which in this artificial environment meant the dome overhead shifted to a golden transparency that allowed natural light to filter through. The candidates spread out across the arena, each selecting their initial positions with the kind of strategic thinking that had kept their respective species alive long enough to reach the stars. Reef Singer naturally headed for the deepest structures, places where she could dive to safety when the floods came. Thorax Prime selected a series of interconnected towers that would allow him to climb vertically with his natural wall-crawling abilities. The others chose positions that played to their biological advantages. Marcus walked straight to a cluster of the tallest trees. Not metallic structures, not ancient towers. Trees. Living, growing trees that some landscape designer had apparently thought would add a nice touch to this monument to engineering excess. He looked up at the massive oak-like specimens, each one easily 60 meters tall, and nodded to himself as if confirming something he had suspected all along. "Kara," Commander Vex 9 said slowly, "are you recording this?" "Yes, sir. Full spectrum analysis, multiple angles, backup storage in 3 separate systems." "Good. I have a feeling we're about to witness either the most spectacular failure in trial history or something that's going to require us to rewrite the rulebook." The first flood cycle began exactly 6 hours after dawn. The arena's warning system activated, a low, harmonic tone that vibrated through the ground and made everyone's teeth ache. Then the water came. It didn't rise gradually like a normal flood. Instead, it erupted from hidden channels and reservoirs, filling the arena with the speed and violence of a tidal wave. Within minutes, the lower structures disappeared beneath churning water that seemed to have its own malevolent intelligence. Reef Singer dove gracefully into the chaos, her form disappearing beneath the surface as she swam toward underwater supply caches. Thorax Prime scuttled up his chosen tower with insectoid efficiency. The other candidates activated various technological solutions: force fields, breathing apparatus, emergency flotation devices. Marcus, meanwhile, had spent the 6 hours doing something that made absolutely no sense to any observer who wasn't familiar with human ingenuity and the specific applications of really good rope. He had built a platform. In the trees. Not just any platform, mind you, using his rope. Branches he had somehow convinced to break in exactly the right places, and what appeared to be an advanced understanding of load distribution and tension systems. He had created a stable living space approximately 40 meters above ground level. When the waters rose, Marcus was sitting comfortably on his improvised platform, legs dangling over the edge, eating what appeared to be some kind of fruit he had found growing on the trees. "This is impossible," breathed Lieutenant Kara, staring at the holographic display. "Sir, according to our behavioral modeling, humans should have attempted to reach the highest metallic structures. They're tool users, but they rely on technology, not." Whatever this island Commander Vex 9's mandibles had stopped clicking altogether. What is he doing now? Marcus had produced a small knife from somewhere and was cutting more rope into specific lengths. As they watched, he began extending his platform, using the rope and branches to create what could only be described as an aerial bridge system between multiple trees. He's expanding his territory, Vex 9 realized. while the others are trapped in their chosen positions, waiting for the water to recede so they can search for supplies. He's creating a transportation network. And indeed, when the flood cycle reached its peak, Marcus was casually walking through the treetops on rope bridges, stopping at various points to harvest fruit, collect rainwater in improvised containers made from large leaves, and generally behaving as if this whole affair was a particularly challenging camping trip. The water began to recede after 3 hours, revealing the other candidates in various states of exhaustion. Reef Singer emerged from the depths, carrying a few supply packages, but the effort of staying underwater for 3 hours had clearly taken its toll. The others struggled down from their defensive positions, moving stiffly as they prepared to search for resources during the brief dry period. Marcus dropped down from his tree platform, using a rope pulley system that he had apparently constructed while everyone else was focused on basic survival. He landed lightly, then proceeded to walk casually through the newly exposed arena, collecting supplies with the kind of efficiency that suggested he had somehow mapped their locations while hanging out in trees 40 meters above ground. How? Kara whispered. How did he know where the supply caches were positioned? Commander Vex 9 studied the replay feeds, his compound eyes tracking the human's movements. Look at his path during the construction phase. He wasn't just building randomly. Every position he chose provided a sightline to supply locations. He was conducting reconnaissance while appearing to simply play with rope and branches. But sir, that would require an understanding of three-dimensional tactical analysis, resource prediction algorithms, and structural engineering principles that humans supposedly don't possess, Vex 9 finished. Yes, I'm aware of what our intelligence reports say about their capabilities. By the time the second flood cycle began, Marcus had accomplished something that defied every strategic model the Galactic Council had ever developed for the flooded trial. He had established what could only be described as a supply network. His expanded platform system now connected 17 different trees, creating an aerial grid that covered nearly a quarter of the arena. At key points, he had constructed storage areas stocked with supplies he had gathered during the brief dry period. When the waters rose again, he didn't retreat to a single defensive position like the others. He began hunting. Hunting what, exactly? Kara asked, watching as Marcus moved through his treetop network with predatory purpose. Her question was answered when he appeared above Thorax Prime's tower. The insectoid was clinging to the structure's peak, exhausted from his second vertical climb. Marcus called down something in what the translation systems identified as English. Need some help up there? Thorax Prime's compound eyes swiveled upward, taking in the human who was somehow 40 meters higher than the tallest structure in this section of the arena. How are you? What island this defies probability calculations? Yeah, humans are pretty good at that, Marcus replied. Then he lowered a rope. Want a lift to somewhere more comfortable? And this, Commander Vex 9 realized with the kind of clarity that usually preceded either enlightenment or nervous breakdown, was when the human revealed his actual strategy. He wasn't just surviving the trial, he was turning it into a cooperative exercise. Within an hour, Marcus had extracted 2 more candidates from precarious positions and brought them to his aerial network. He shared supplies, provided secure resting areas, and generally behaved as if the concept of competition was entirely foreign to his species. Sir, Kara said quietly, I think we may have seriously misjudged human tactical capabilities. You think? Vex 9's sarcasm could have cut through battle armor. The human has turned a survival trial into a rescue operation, and somehow everyone involved is doing better than they would have on their own. But the real revelation came during the third flood cycle, when Reef Singer found herself in genuine trouble. A structural collapse had trapped her in an underwater chamber, with no way to reach the surface before her oxygen ran out. The other candidates, safe in their tree positions, could only watch helplessly as she struggled 40 meters below. Marcus, however, had apparently anticipated even this possibility. He produced a length of rope that he had somehow treated with some kind of coating, attached weights to create a guided descent line, and dove. He dove into churning floodwater to rescue a being who had spent the entire trial mocking his species as weak, air-breathing mammals unsuited for aquatic survival. The rescue itself violated approximately 11 different assumptions about human physiology. Marcus held his breath for nearly 6 minutes, navigated through collapsed debris in zero visibility, and somehow managed to guide an unconscious pelagic warrior to the surface using nothing but rope, determination, and what could only be described as weaponized stubbornness. When Reef Singer regained consciousness on Marcus's tree platform, her first words were a bioluminescent pattern that roughly translated to, "This is impossible. You are an air-breathing mammal. You should have died." Marcus, who was wringing floodwater out of his hair, shrugged. "Yeah, humans are pretty bad at staying dead when people need help." Commander Vex, 9, stared at the displays showing his transformed arena. What had begun as a trial designed to test individual survival capabilities had become something else entirely. The human had created a community. In trees. With rope. While casually ignoring every rule of engagement that the Galactic Council thought it understood about interspecies cooperation. "Sir," Kara said, her voice carrying an edge of something that might have been awe, "what do we do now?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Outside, the human was demonstrating proper knot-tying techniques to a group of alien warriors who represented some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. And they were paying attention as if he were teaching them the secrets of faster-than-light travel. "Now," Commander Vex 9 said slowly, "we watch the rest of the trial. And then we have a very serious conversation about what exactly we think we know about human capabilities." The fourth flood cycle was approaching, and something told him that the human wasn't finished surprising them yet. The fourth flood arrived with mechanical precision. But this time, Commander Vex 9 noticed something different in the behavioral patterns of his test subjects. Instead of the desperate scrambling that usually characterized this phase of the trial, there was organization. Marcus had spent the brief dry period doing something that made Vex 9's mandibles ache just thinking about it. The human had somehow convinced his rescued candidates to help him expand the rope network even further. What had started as a simple tree platform had evolved into something resembling a three-dimensional transportation hub. "Lieutenant Kara." "Vex," 9 said, his voice carrying the particular strain of a commander who was watching his universe reshape itself. "Are you documenting the modifications to standard trial parameters?" "Sir, I'm not entirely sure what parameters still apply," Kara admitted. "The human has essentially, well, he's rewritten the trial conditions." And indeed he had. The aerial network now covered nearly 60% of the arena. Thorax Prime was using his natural climbing abilities to anchor rope lines in positions no other species could reach. Reef Singer, despite her earlier contempt for land-dwelling mammals, was diving during flood cycles to secure underwater anchor points. Even the gravitic delegate had contributed by using his personal force field to create stable platforms at crucial junctions. Marcus himself had become something like a coordinator, moving through his network with the casual confidence of someone who had turned a death trap into a public transportation system. "This is unprecedented," muttered Sub-Commander Klex from his monitoring station. "Survival trials are designed to test individual adaptation under extreme stress. This human has turned it into a team-building exercise." "More than that," Vex 9 observed, studying the tactical displays. "Look at their resource distribution patterns. Instead of hoarding supplies for individual survival, they're pooling resources and distributing them based on physiological needs. The pelagic gets the protein rations, the insectoid gets the carbohydrate concentrates, and the human. The human gets whatever's left over," Kara finished, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. "Sir, that's not just cooperation. That's sacrificial behavior for beings who aren't even his own species." The fifth flood cycle, brought the trial's first major crisis. A cascade failure in the arena's structural systems caused 3 major towers to collapse simultaneously, creating a debris field that blocked several crucial drainage channels. Instead of receding after 3 hours as programmed, the water level continued to rise. Emergency protocols should have activated. The trial should have been suspended. Rescue teams should have been deployed. Instead, Marcus Kane looked at the rising water, performed what appeared to be rapid mental calculations, and announced to his mixed-species crew, "Okay, everyone, time to build a boat." A boat? Reef Singer's bioluminescent patterns flickered through what could politely be described as panic. "Human, the water is rising beyond safe parameters. We should activate emergency extraction protocols." "Where's the fun in that?" Marcus replied, already stripping bark from nearby trees with his knife. "Besides, I've always wanted to try lashing together a proper raft. This seems like the perfect opportunity." Commander Vex 9 watched in fascination as the human began demonstrating something called raft construction to a group of beings whose civilizations had mastered interstellar travel. The process involved splitting tree sections, binding them with rope in complex patterns, and creating what Marcus cheerfully referred to as, basically, a floating platform with style. "Sir," Kara whispered, "should we intervene? The water is now 15 meters above maximum safe levels." "Not yet," Vex 9 replied, his compound eyes fixed on the scene below. "I want to see how far human improvisation can stretch the laws of physics." The answer, apparently, was considerably further than expected. Within 2 hours, Marcus had constructed not just a raft, but a multi-level floating platform complete with shelter areas, storage compartments, and what appeared to be a primitive but functional sail system made from emergency blankets and rope rigging. But the truly astounding part wasn't the construction itself. It was how he had managed to teach advanced engineering principles to beings whose species had different mathematical systems, different spatial reasoning abilities, and in some cases, completely different sensory apparatus for understanding 3-dimensional space. Thorax Prime, whose species thought in terms of crystalline geometric patterns, somehow grasped Marcus's explanations about load distribution and buoyancy. Reef Singer, whose people understood water dynamics through biological intuition rather than mechanical principles, found herself contributing insights about current flow and stability that improved the design significantly. "He's not just building a raft," Sub-Commander Klex observed. "He's conducting a cross-species engineering seminar in applied survival techniques." The 6th flood cycle should have been the end of everything. Arena systems were failing, backup protocols weren't responding, and the water had risen to levels that made the original trial parameters completely meaningless. Under normal circumstances, this would have been classified as a catastrophic system failure requiring immediate evacuation and possible criminal investigation. Marcus looked at the situation and announced, "Well, this is definitely more interesting than the brochure suggested." Then he did something that would be discussed in military academies across 3 spiral arms for the next century. He organized an evacuation, not for his team, but for the arena's wildlife. "Wildlife?" Kara repeated weakly. "The birds, the tree creatures, the various small mammals that the landscape designers included for authenticity." Marcus explained to his crew as if this were perfectly obvious. "The water's rising past their safe zones. We can't just leave them to drown." And so, while arena control systems failed and emergency protocols crashed, the candidates of the 147th flooded trial conducted what could only be described as the most improbable wildlife rescue operation in recorded galactic history. Marcus had somehow convinced his multi-species team that rescuing confused tree-dwelling creatures was a reasonable use of their time during a mechanical apocalypse. Thorax Prime used his climbing abilities to reach terrified animals in the highest branches. Reef Singer dove to evacuate aquatic species that were somehow struggling despite being, well, aquatic. The gravitic delegate created force field cages to safely transport creatures that might otherwise panic and injure themselves. "Sir," Kara said, in the tone of someone whose understanding of reality had taken several severe impacts, "they're not just surviving the trial anymore. They're managing it." Commander Vex 9 studied the displays, showing his completely transformed arena. What had begun as a test of individual survival had become a collaborative engineering project, wildlife conservation effort, and impromptu demonstration of interspecies cooperation. The human had somehow turned a potentially lethal trial into what appeared to be the most successful diplomatic mission in recent council history. "Lieutenant," he said slowly, "I want you to compile a complete report on these proceedings. Every measurement, every interaction, every instance of the human doing something that our behavioral models said was impossible." "Sir, what classification should I assign to the report?" Vex 9 considered this question while watching Marcus demonstrate proper animal handling techniques to a pelagic warrior who could theoretically dismember a battle cruiser with her bare hands. "Classified as humanity, we may have made some serious miscalculations. The seventh flood cycle never came. Arena systems had been so thoroughly disrupted by the Tenedae cascade failures that the automatic mechanisms finally surrendered and defaulted to manual control, which meant that Commander Vex 9 found himself in the unprecedented position of having to decide when and how to end a trial that had already exceeded every parameter it was designed to test. The problem was that none of his test subjects seemed particularly interested in ending anything. Marcus had used the mechanical failures as an opportunity to convert his floating platform into what he called a proper settlement. The raft now featured multiple levels, specialized areas for different species needs, efficient water collection and purification systems, and what appeared to be the beginnings of sustainable food production using rescued plant specimens. "Human," Reef Singer said during what Marcus had designated as evening planning session, her bioluminescent patterns cycling through colors that indicated deep confusion. "The trial period has officially concluded. We have survived the designated time frame. Why are you constructing permanent habitation?" Marcus looked up from where he was teaching Thorax Prime how to weave waterproof baskets from plant fibers. "Well, the arena systems are still pretty unstable, right? And the water level hasn't returned to baseline parameters. Seems irresponsible to just leave everything in this condition." "Leave everything?" The gravitic delegate's translation matrix struggled with the concept. "Human Marcus, this is a test facility. It is not meant to be inhabited." "Says who?" Marcus replied with that particular human grin that made other species check their insurance policies. "I mean, look around. We've got sustainable shelter, renewable resources, a diverse ecosystem that we've successfully stabilized, and a working model of interspecies cooperation that actually functions. Why would we abandon all this just because some timer went off?" Commander Vex 9 listened to this conversation through the arena's audio pickups and felt something that he would later describe in his personal logs as existential vertigo. "Sir," Kara said quietly, "I think the human intends to keep the arena." "Keep it?" "As in permanent habitation." "Sir, according to these readings, he's not just maintaining the systems he built, he's improving them. The water purification setup is now more efficient than our original design. The structural modifications have actually increased overall stability, and the interspecies cooperation protocols they've developed." She paused, checking her data again. "Sir, they've essentially created a functioning multi-species colony in 7 days, using nothing but rope, trees, and what appears to be weaponized optimism." The final revelation came when Marcus, apparently noticing that the arena's communication systems were still functional, addressed the control room directly. "Hey, Command! Thanks for the trial setup, but we're going to need to make some modifications to the original parameters. First, can we get the water level stabilized at about 30 meters? That seems to be the sweet spot for everybody's needs. Second, we'll need supply deliveries for about 40 individuals. Oh, did I mention we've got more volunteers wanting to join the settlement? More volunteers? Vex-9's voice cracked slightly. Yeah, apparently word got out through the observation networks. We've got applications from 6 different species who want to participate in our survival community experiment. I've got to say, this is working out way better than anyone expected. And that was when Commander Vex-9 realized that the human had done something unprecedented in the history of Galactic Council trial programs. He had turned a test into a success story that nobody wanted to end. 3 months later, the facility officially renamed the Marcus Kane Interspecies Cooperation Research Station hosted its first official diplomatic conference. The agenda focused on practical applications of cross-cultural survival techniques, sustainable community development, and what Marcus cheerfully called the revolutionary concept of just helping each other out. Commander Vex-9, now reassigned to oversee what had become the Council's most successful interspecies relations project, watched from his new permanent command center as Marcus demonstrated advanced rope work techniques to a mixed group that included diplomats, scientists, and what appeared to be several members of the Galactic Engineering Corps. Any regrets about how the trial turned out, sir? Lieutenant Kara asked. Vex-9 considered the question while watching a pelagic warrior and an insectoid architect collaborate on designing improved underwater habitation modules, using principles they had learned from a human with a rope and an apparently unlimited supply of creative stubbornness. Regrets? He said finally. Lieutenant, we set out to test whether various species could survive a controlled disaster scenario. Instead, we accidentally discovered that humans don't just survive disasters. They turn them into opportunities for community improvement projects. He paused, mandibles clicking in what had become his characteristic expression of bemused acceptance. The only regret I have is that it took us this long to realize that maybe, just maybe, the humans have been trying to tell us something important all along. Which is, sir? Commander Vex-9 watched Marcus launch into an enthusiastic explanation of something he was calling advanced knot theory for interstellar applications, surrounded by representatives of civilizations that had mastered technologies beyond human comprehension, all of them taking notes, as if he were revealing the secrets of the universe. That survival isn't about individual strength or superior technology, Vex-9 said. It's about figuring out how to help everyone else survive, too. And apparently, humans are very, very good at that. The story of the 147th flooded trial became required reading in diplomatic academies throughout the galaxy. Not as an example of human physical capabilities or technological innovation, but as a case study in what happened when you gave humans a problem and forgot to tell them it was impossible to solve. Marcus Kane himself never did figure out why everyone seemed so surprised that he had managed to keep everyone alive using basic engineering and common sense. As far as he was concerned, that was just what you did when people needed help. After all, as he frequently told his mixed species community, humans were really pretty bad at letting people die when there was something they could do about it. Even if it involved building platforms in trees with nothing but rope and an unreasonable amount of optimism.